Fight fans, welcome to the PBC Podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Bouhairie and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome everyone to the PBC Podcast. I'm Kenneth Bouhairie.
And I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
I want to thank you all for joining us. Of course, it is the big fight week because the big fish is back. Errol Spence Jr., the truth, the undefeated WBC and IBF welterweight world champion, takes on WBA champion Yordenis Ugas in the first three-belt unification at 147 since Mayweather versus Pacquiao back in 2015. Saturday night at AT&T Stadium, live on SHOWTIME PPV. Shout out to Mitch Abramson, whose flight landed despite his pilot sounding a little scared. The weather's kind of shaky out here in Dallas, but the show must go on. We've got Stephen Breadman Edwards joining us this week. He's going to break down Saturday night's card, among other things. Plus, we'll recap last week's epic Lubin versus Fundora bout and the entire event. And in this week's toe-to-toe section, Mike and I will list our top 5 most successful former U.S. Olympic boxers since 2008. That's 3 Olympics. It's a good choice, given that, Spence is an Olympian, Ugas is an Olympian as well. So without further ado, let's jump right into the PBC Fight of the Week. Saturday night, it's going down at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. Errol Spence Jr. and Yordenis Ugas meet in a 3-belt welterweight unification live on SHOWTIME pay-per-view. Plus, preceding that, SHOWTIME Championship Boxing kicks off the night with an excellent 2-fight card. The SHOWTIME card begins at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The pay-per-view begins at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And we begin here with the essentials.
Okay, here we go. Errol Spence, 27-0, 21 knockouts. Ugas, 27-4 with 12. Obviously, Spence is 5-0 in his last 5 with 2 knockouts. Ugas is 4-1 with 1 KO. The loss was the disputed decision against Sean Porter. Last fight for Spence was Danny Garcia, unanimous decision, December 5th of 2020. Ugas outpointed Manny Pacquiao to win his title on August 21st of last year. Spence has a 78% knockout ratio, Ugas 39%. Spence is 132 rounds, Ugas 208. Neither guy's a kid. Spence is 32, Ugas is 35. Spence turned pro 2012, Ugas 2010. Spence is a southpaw. Ugas fights from an orthodox stance. Close in height, 5'9.5" for Spence, 5'9" for Ugas. 72-inch reach for Spence, 69 for Ugas. Spence comes from the Dallas area. Ugas is Cuban, but he's lived in Miami, I think, for quite a long time now.
Man, interesting, especially the rounds fought. Ugas is such an experienced fighter. Let's start with Errol Spence. What are his keys to victory?
Well, I just think that Spence needs to stay on top of Ugas, which I think he's going to do. Jab, jab, jab. He's got a great jab and follow with hard, accurate power shots just from beginning to end. He needs to impose his will on Ugas. Spence is, from my perspective, is at least as good a boxer as Ugas, probably better. And he's the physically stronger guy on top of that. And Spence will probably have to make adjustments during the fight because Ugas is a really versatile, good fighter himself. But that's one of Spence's strengths, though, thinking on his feet. I think all he has to do is be smart and throw a high volume of punches, and I think he's going to win the fight.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the jab, which I think is always key for Spence. What about Ugas? What are his keys to victory?
I think the key thing for him will be to counter well, which he's capable of doing. I think Spence is going to be the aggressor. He's going to be the guy who comes forward. Ugas is a really good, experienced boxer. He might have the ability to slip Spence's punches and then counter with his own. It won't be easy to do that, obviously, but if he can, he could pull off a surprise, pull off an upset. He should also jab himself to the head and chest, which also can slow Spence down and throw him off his game. So I could see a path for Ugas to win the fight. I just think Spence is going to win.
Yeah, I think I would be surprised if both of them come forward this fight and they just meet in the middle and sort of duke it out. But, the question everyone wants to know is Errol Spence fully healed from all the injuries? And how has he looked to you in the lead up to this fight?
I don't think anybody except Spence knows, what he is in terms of how close to 100% he is physically. Maybe he doesn't even know for sure. It's kind of hard to quantify, I think. I didn't think he looked great against Danny Garcia after he returned from his car accident, but I thought he looked pretty damn good. And don't forget, Garcia is one of the better fighters of his era. He's a guy with a lot of experience who could punch hard and take a hard punch.
Sure.
And I think the eye injuries in the past, I think that's healed. I've spoken to Derek James a few times now. He swears Spence is healthy. He's working his ass off, and he looks really good in training camp, and I believe him. So I think Spence's physical issues are in the past.
Yeah, it seems a lot of people feel that way. I was listening to the Chicken Talk Twitter space earlier today, and nearly everyone on there picked Spence to win. I mean, we've seen Ugas go neck and neck with Sean Porter. We saw him beat Manny Pacquiao, Brian Perella, Abel Ramos, Ray Robinson. Is Yordenis Ugas being overlooked?
Maybe by the fans. Because he's not the star that Spence is. I think people tend to pick the guy that they know better if they don't know too much about the other guy.
Yeah.
I think Spence knows how good Ugas is, though. Ugas has been this you sort of just indicated, he's been almost untouchable for a lot of years now. The only exception being the disputed loss to Sean Porter. And I was at that fight. I thought he won a close fight. I thought he deserved the decision. And he took the title from Manny Pacquiao, as everybody knows. I don't think Ugas is as good as Spence, but he is a damn good fighter, which is why this is a really good matchup.
Yeah, an excellent matchup. And with that in mind, let's get into our fighter breakdown. This is something we do for our big matchups. We've got a list of categories, and we rate each fighter from 1 to 5, 5 being the highest score. Then we tally up and see who comes out on top. So, Mike, let's start with Amateur Foundation. What's your rating for each fighter?
Well, both guys were Olympians, so they both have that amateur foundation. If I'd have to, I would give an edge to Ugas here. He came up in the Cuban system. He was a world champion. He was an Olympic medalist. Spence didn't accomplish quite as much in the amateurs. That said, I think it's basically a push. I gave both guys a 5.
Yeah, so did I, for the exact same reasons. I mean, both guys are very, very accomplished amateurs. They've seen fought a lot of fighters who are pros today. I give both a 5. What about skill set?
These guys are two of the most skillful, polished boxers on the planet. They were born with natural gifts. Obviously, they had the amateur foundation. They fought at a very high level as a professional boxers for like a decade or more. So it doesn't get much more skillful than this. So I gave both guys a 5.
Yeah, you know what? Again, I agree with you. I think both these are two highly skilled technicians.
Right.
No doubt about it. What about speed and athleticism?
Again, I think they were both born with natural gifts, which is what we're talking about here. That includes speed and athleticism. I would describe both these guys as thoroughbreds. That said, I think there are faster, more athletic guys in boxing. I think in both of their cases, I think their ring acumen is their primary strength. So I gave both guys a 4 in this category.
I gave Spence a 4, Ugas a 3. I don't think speed athleticism is really his game. I think he's more timing and technique. He's not the quickest of hand or foot. So I give Spence a slight edge there. What about punching power?
So neither guy is a welterweight version of Deontay Wilder, but both guys could hurt you. I'd give Spence an edge here. I think he's a little more explosive, a little bit more powerful than Ugas, who maybe doesn't sit down on his punches like Spence does. I mean, Spence really tries to hurt you most of the time. So I gave Spence a 4-3 advantage in this category.
I have it 4-4. I'm with you. I don't think either guy's really a one-punch knockout artist. And I do think Spence is the slightly bigger puncher, just not by much, in my opinion. I think Ugas hits hard. He may not be as hard as Spence, but I think both hit hard enough, so I gave both a 4. What about physical strength?
Yeah, this was a pretty easy category. Spence has fought at 147 or a little above his whole career. He was he even fought heavier as an amateur. He's a big, strong, strapping welterweight, which I think is one factor in his success. Ugas isn't a small welterweight by any means, but he did fight at lower weights part of his career, and he doesn't strike me as a physically imposing welterweight, at least not like Spence does. So I gave Spence a 5-4 edge in physical strength.
Interesting. I give both of them a 5 here. Spence, no doubt about it, one of the bigger, stronger welterweights in the game today. But I think strength is something that that Ugas has a lot of too. He was physically very imposing against Sean Porter. We typically don't see folks able to move Sean around the ring. He's usually the bully in there, but Ugas had his way at times. I think that strength is one of his strengths. What about versatility?
I think this is where Spence shines. He's one of the most versatile active boxers, in my opinion. I call him a chameleon because he can beat you in so many different ways. He fought Sean Porter's fight and beat him. He fought Mikey Garcia's fight and won that time too. A fighter who could win in many different ways is really tough to take down. Ugas is an excellent all-around. Don't get me wrong, he's an excellent all-around fighter, but not quite in Spence league, I don't think, in terms of versatility. So I went 5-4 Spence in this category.
So did I. I like Spence here. I think versatility, as you said, is one of his biggest strengths. He can box going forward. He can box going backwards. He can fight on the inside. He can counter everything. You name it, Spence has got it. And Ugas is pretty skilled as well, pretty versatile, just not quite on the level of Spence. 5-4 there. What about durability?
Well, first of all, Spence showed inhuman resilience by surviving that car crash relatively unscathed, although I think that was mostly lucky. Listen, he's a tough guy. That fight with Porter proved that to me beyond a doubt. That was a rough fight, and he got through it and had his hand raised. And I don't ever recall seeing Spence hurt. I mean, there probably have been one or two times that I don't recall them. And if we want to use Porter as a barometer, Ugas also went the distance with Porter. So that says something about him. And he's never been stopped he's lost 4 times. He's never been stopped. So I actually gave both guys 5 on this one.
So did I. I think these are two of the bigger, stronger, more durable fighters at welterweight. Let's move on to experience. Who do you have with the edge here?
You know what? You don't get much more experience than these two guys at this point. So I gave both guys a 5.
Yes, so did I. Completely agree with you. They've been fighting at high level, amateurs and pros. What about freshness?
Yeah, this was an interesting category. I wasn't quite sure what direction to go with this. I guess you have to say that Spence is fresh because he's fought only once in 2.5 years, but you wonder whether that could work against him. Ugas has been in some tough fights, but he hasn't taken a beating or anything like that. And he had only the Pacquiao fight in the past 19 months. So I think technically both guys are pretty fresh. So I gave them both a 5.
So did I. Same reasons. I think these are two well-preserved guys. And we'll see how that plays out on Saturday night. Last category, you got Derrick James in Spence's corner, Ismael Salas in Ugas's corner. Who has the advantage?
No one. Ugas's trainer, as you mentioned, Ismael Salas, is sort of a legend, having made his name for himself in Cuba. He really is, and he's done a particularly great job with Ugas. He just has a ton of respect for me and pretty much everybody. I also have a ton of respect for Derrick James, who I think is one of the very best in the business. I don't think anything separates these two guys, which is I gave them both a 5.
Yeah, I'm with you. Both 5, both excellent trainers. All right, let's tally it up. What you got?
So it's funny because I feel like Spence is going to win the fight. I think it's a good competitive fight, but I think he's going to win clearly. But my total is only 48-45, which is pretty close.
Yeah, I've got it 48-46, even closer. And you say you like Spence. How do you like Spence winning?
I just think Spence is too good for Ugas, all around. I think he can and will outbox Ugas, whose strength his strength is his technical ability. Of course, both guys will have some success. That always happens at this level. But Spence is going to punch more accurately than Ugas. He's going to punch more harder than Ugas. And I think in the end, he's going to end up frustrating Ugas with his defensive ability, which people don't talk about too much. I think it's really hard to hit Spence cleanly, and I think Ugas is going to find that out in the fight. It's going to be a competitive fight, but I think Spence is going to control the action and win a clear decision.
Yeah, I like Spence by decision as well. I think this is going to be a very, very good fight. I think it's going to be very close early on, maybe even the edge to Ugas, but I expect Errol to make the adjustments down the stretch and finish strong. So Spence by clear decision. Now, in the co-feature, Isaac Cruz, one of the most exciting fighters in the sport, takes on former champ Yordenis Ugas in 10-round lightweight action. Mike, what are your thoughts on the matchup?
My first thought is it's a fun matchup from a fan standpoint because both of these guys come to fight. I'm not sure how competitive it will be in the end, but it's going to be a lot of fun to watch as long as it lasts.
Yeah, I think so too. What are Gamboa's keys to victory, I should say?
I will almost never say this, but honestly, I'm not sure there is a path to victory for Gamboa. If he stands and trades with Cruz, forget it. He has no hope, right? I guess he'd have to try to turn back the clock and box, but at 40, I doubt he can do that. We'll see, though. Gamboa is an experienced veteran. He's been there and done that a million times. Anything is possible in this fight. I guess a lot of it depends on how he feels physically.
Yeah, and I would say Gamboa still has good pop. Power usually last thing to go. So, and as you mentioned, his experience. Who knows? He may lay a trap for Cruz. How do you see the fight playing out?
Well, I think Cruz gives Gamboa no choice but to exchange punches, which, again, will be fun to watch as long as Gamboa can remain on his feet. I just don't expect that to be too long. So I'm predicting Cruz by a 5th-round knockout.
Yeah, I like Cruz by mid to late round stoppage too, but I do think his style sort of plays into Gamboa's strengths, which is Gamboa's speed and power. So it's a dangerous fight for him. Now, the third fight on the card, unbeaten lightweight sensation Jose Valenzuela takes on a veteran in Francisco Vargas. Mike, Valenzuela's really started to turn heads as one of the better young fighters in the game. He's 22, he's in the Benavidez camp. What are your thoughts on his rise?
If you recall, Valenzuela was my prospect of the year at the end of last year. He showed us everything we need to see against Austin Dulé, who's a good fighter. Valenzuela showed a diverse arsenal of skills. He showed poise, even though he's only 22 years old. And he just dominated Dulé before stopping him in 4 rounds. I think for him, it's a matter of when, not if, he becomes a world title holder.
Yeah, he's certainly got the goods and the pedigree. What makes Vargas dangerous in this fight?
Well, Vargas is just an old warhorse at 37. He's been in just so many battles. He's the kind of guy that just never, ever gives up. He went the distance with Isaac Cruz in his last fight. It was a spirited effort that shows you that he still has some fight left in him. I think Valenzuela will win, but he's probably going to be pushed by this seasoned veteran. Vargas has just been there too many times to just dismiss.
So what do you think happens?
I think Valenzuela is going to play the sharpshooter. He'll pick Vargas apart, kind of the way he did against Dulé, against whom he just couldn't miss the target, basically. I see him landing quick, hard combinations consistently and wearing Vargas down. And I have a feeling Vargas won't hear the final bell. I'm going to go Valenzuela KO 8.
Yeah, I like Valenzuela here by mid-round KO. I just like his confidence, the skills, obviously the power, and I think he's going to impose his will. And not to mention he's a finisher. So I'm with you. I expect him to close the show. Now, the pay-per-view card opens up with a terrific welterweight match between 2 guys who aren't afraid to let their hands go. Unbeaten Cody Crowley and, of course, dangerous contender Josecito Lopez. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
I go way back with Josecito Lopez from when he first sort of arrived on the scene. So my first thought when I heard that this matchup was made was, wow, this is a good test for Crowley. Crowley isn't a great boxer. He's not a great puncher. He's just a really clever boxer, and he's just ridiculously fit. He's the kind of guy who finds ways to beat whomever he fights, which he obviously has done consistently. This is a tough matchup for him, though. Lopez is a tough veteran who's been in there with a lot of top guys. He has tons of experience. I know he's 37, but I think he has more to give. I think we're going to learn a lot more about Crowley in this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about him being a clever boxer. What does Crowley need to do in order to win?
I think just be patient and maintain his poise. I think he's probably too good for this version of Lopez. I think he can outbox and outwork him. A potential problem is that Lopez is a gritty, again, experienced guy who's going to take it to Crowley. Crowley needs to withstand the storm, which I think is inevitable. I think it's going to come, and stick with his game plan. If he can do that, I think he'll have a good chance of winning the fight.
What about Lopez? What does he need to do in order to win?
Use his experience, throw things at Crowley that he hasn't seen, maybe make him uncomfortable, hurt him, which is a possibility. Lopez has got a lot of power. I can see Lopez doing all those things. He's not a kid anymore, though. We'll see what he brings.
Yeah, for sure. I got a feeling I know who you're picking. What's your prediction?
I think it's Crowley's time. I think he's good at what he does, boxing intelligent, working really hard. And I think he has the poise to handle whatever Lopez throws at him. So I'm going to say Crowley by unanimous decision.
Yeah, I like Crowley by decision as well. I just think he has more tools in his arsenal. He's going to avoid the big shot and land enough of his own to win clearly. Now, as we said prior to the pay-per-view, we've got action on Showtime beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And in the main event, man, this card is stacked from top to bottom. In the main event, two unbeaten welterweights, Radza Butayev takes on Eimantas Stanionis. The winner of this fight is in line to face the Spence-Ugas winner. And a lot of folks believe this fight steals the show. What do you think?
Yeah, I can see that. These are two talented, offensive-minded guys on the rise, which is exciting. I don't see how it can't be entertaining.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Let's talk about Butayev. What are the keys to victory for him?
Butayev is physically a really strong, powerful guy. He just outmuscled a really good fighter in Jamal James to win by knockout last October. I don't know if I was shocked that he won the fight, but I was shocked by the way he won that fight.
Yeah.
He's going to have to do the same things to Stanionis, get in his face. Don't give him room to work and just beat him up. He might also have to cut off the ring, though. We'll see how well he can do that if he has to. But yeah, I think just do his things, go after Stanionis. Don't give him room to breathe.
What are Stanionis' keys to victory?
I think Stanionis also is a strong guy and a good puncher, but he's also a clever boxer, which could be the key for him. If I were him, I might jab and stick and move, be an elusive target. That could frustrate Butayev. And Stanionis, this could be the key. Stanionis needs to go to the body consistently, which he does really well anyway. That could discourage Butayev and slow him down, wear him out. Bottom line, don't just stand there and trade with Butayev. That could be suicide.
Yeah, he's going to have to try and find a way to keep him off of him. Yeah. How do you see the fight playing out?
You know what? This is one of the toughest picks ever. To me, this is like an absolute 50-50 fight. It's almost like I want to refuse to make a pick, but I'll stay in the spirit of this and go for it. So I tend to think Stanionis is the better all-around fighter. I think the Lithuanian will deliver a nice blend of boxing and punching and will ultimately frustrate Butayev and win a decision. It could be a close decision, but I think he's going to win a decision.
I'm with you 100%. I like Stanionis here. I think he's got fast hands, good pop, durability. He's just slightly better than Butayev at those categories and perhaps a better boxer. I expect him to win a decision as well. In the TV opener, undefeated 140-pound knockout artist Brandon Lee faces Zachary Ochoa. Mike, what are your thoughts on Lee's ascension?
I think it's exciting. Who doesn't love a dynamic guy like that who just whacks everybody out? And he doesn't seem to be slowing down even as his opposition improves. There's an obvious caveat, though. Can he do the same thing at the elite level? We don't know that yet, so we just have to wait and see.
This is probably the toughest test of Lee's career. Yet he's still a pretty strong favorite. You talk to anybody, they've got Lee winning, usually by knockout. Are folks sleeping on Ochoa?
Probably. He's coming off a close loss to Juan Velasco, but he acquitted himself well. Some people thought he actually deserved to win that fight. Ochoa's a good fighter with a lot of heart. He works really hard to get better, from what I understand. A guy like that always has a chance to win fights. I think you just said this, I think he might be as good as anyone Lee's faced. So this is a good test.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your pick?
Well, Lee has stopped his last 15 opponents. I got to think he's going to catch Ochoa and take him out at some point. So I'm going to predict that a 7th round knockout. But that said, someday Lee is going to run into trouble against someone. And I think Ochoa might be good enough to be that guy. I don't think he will, but he might be.
Yeah, it's a good pick. I like Lee as well, but I think he has some problems here, and I think he's going to be taking the distance. So I see Lee winning a decision. One quick note, prediction league, both Mike and I are 10-5-1. Doesn't seem like that's going to change. It's time to bring in our guest this week. Well, I should note, actually, it doesn't seem like the standings are going to change. Our record certainly will. Back to our guest. He trained Zachary Ochoa. We just discussed his fight with Brandon Lee. And he's been in the corner of a slew of good fighters, including former unified champ Julian Williams. Those who check out his daily bread mailbag on Boxing Scene already know he's one of the best boxing minds in the game, Stephen Breadman Edwards. Breadman, first Saturday night, we have the big PBC Showtime pay-per-view, Errol Spence versus Yordenis Ugas. And leading up to that fight, Showtime Championship boxing card. On that card, undefeated Brandon Lee takes on your fighter, Zachary Ochoa. How has camp been for Ochoa?
Well, we had a good camp. He had a really good camp. So, we'll see how the fight plays out, but we had a really good, productive camp.
That's good to hear. Tell us what you like about it, Sean.
You know what, man? He's really dedicated. He's really dedicated. He came down to Philly, got an Airbnb. He put the work in. It was a really, really tough camp. He didn't complain. He was away from his family for a while. It was real. Easy kid to train. Anything you ask him to do, he tells you. He tries his best to do it. He's he's very, very disciplined. He's just an all-around good kid to train, man. And that's all I can say. Everybody's not easy to train. He doesn't give you any resistance. Whatever you ask him to do, he does it.
Gotcha.
So, that's a plus.
Good deal. So he's coming off a close decision loss to Juan Velasco. What did he take away from that disappointment, do you think?
Man, it was a good fight. It was the fight of the night. I wish it was on TV. It was one of those fights where, either guy had a case for winning. Unfortunately, we didn't get the call. I remember looking at Twitter afterwards, and a lot of people that was there thought we won. It was a bad one. I thought one of the scorecards was off. 3 was a pretty bad scorecard. It was one of those draws type of close fights. We just took, every time you get in the ring and you go to a camp and you peek out and you fight a better opponent, you kind of you get better because of that. Those little spots of things that we could have did more. There was times where he could have boxed instead of brawled, and there was times where he could have stepped on it instead of boxed. So you just, you learn and then you move on. But if the fight was on TV, it was a great fight. It was a really good fight. And I just, didn't go our way. He didn't complain, didn't cry. He just, went back to the drawing board, and, now we're here.
Very good. So Lee is one of the rising names in the sport. What are your thoughts on him as a fighter?
He's a good fighter. I'm one of those people, man. I don't give a guy too much credit, and I definitely don't disrespect fighters or underestimate them. From everything that I've seen, he's a good fighter. But, a lot of these guys, you don't know what they have until they step up. A lot of fighters, we've seen sometimes when they step up, they get exposed, and sometimes they step up and they show the world what they really have. As far as Brandon Lee is concerned, I don't know. I don't know what he is. We have to see him under the gun. We have to see him in certain types of fights, and then we can tell you what he is and what he isn't. You know what I mean? I don't know right now. Seems like a big puncher. He seems like a strong kid. Seems very, very confident. But, sometimes guys are undefeated. Sometimes their matchmaking is undefeated. So we got to find out Saturday night exactly what he is and what he's made of.
Yeah, that leads to my next question. So I think there's some people out there who wonder maybe whether he's a little bit overhyped. What are your thoughts on that feeling?
I mean, we've seen, I don't want to call anybody out, but we've seen prospects just recently who were really overhyped and they're not on the level, and they need to be working more, and they need more seasoning before they hit the big stage. I really don't know with him. If you're asking me, that's my honest assessment. I can't tell. I don't know if he is or he isn't. I don't really know. I don't know if he's, he seems like a big puncher. He seems strong. When you're the A side, you have things that are in your favor. I'll give you an example. We learned about this fight in February, and Brandon Lee's a 40-pounder, right? Mm-hmm. Well, they wanted this fight at 143 pounds. Mm-hmm. So that shows me that he's a kid that struggles to make weight, and he's probably a welterweight, but obviously doesn't want to move up to welterweight, so he wants to be able to pick on smaller fighters. So that's what that tells me, because we had over 8 or 9 weeks to make the weight. So nobody should have to come in with an extra 3 pounds unless you took the fight on short notice. But when you take a fight and you got 9 weeks to train, why would you have to come in with an extra 3 pounds if you weren't struggling to make weight and you weren't trying to get extra advantages. And I understand it. It's times in fights where I'm the A side, it's times in fights where I'm the B side. So I explained that to Zach. But that tells me something about him. That tells me that he struggles to make weight, and they want to give him a chance to be able to hit on smaller guys, because if he moves up, those advantages might not be around. And it's a lot of sharks at 147 pounds, so he may not want to go there yet. So he's getting to pick on smaller guys, but that's fine. It's boxing. And, so when you ask me what I think of him, I know that a lot goes on with making prospects look sometimes better than what they are until we find out what they really are.
Yeah. I guess we're going to find out on Saturday night.
Well, listen, when they said 143 pounds, I didn't complain because I know how the game goes. If we beat him, then the next time we fight, then we fight at a more comfortable weight for us, So there's nothing to complain about. I understand that. I was shocked, though, because we had Tom. But I was like, okay, now I see what it is. He's a big kid, and, he probably doesn't like the way it feels to make 140. But he's like, I'm not going to move up to 147 yet, because you move up to 147, you know what's going to happen. They're going to start saying, hey, well, he's 24-0. Why can't he fight Boots Ennis? Why can't he fight this guy? So I understand how boxing goes. So instead of that, you fight smaller guys, because Zach actually made 135 pounds to be on standby on the Gervonta Davis, Isaac Cruz undercard. So we were trying to move down, So when they said 143, I'm like, damn, they're trying to get this kid every advantage he could get, but it's fine. It's boxing.
Right. That's true. Now, in the main event, a lot of great fights that night, obviously. We got Errol Spence, Yordenis Ugas. Give us your thoughts on the style matchup.
On which matchup?
Spence and Ugas.
I think it's going to be a really good fight. I could kind of tell when the fight's going to be a good fight. It's not so much styles as temperaments. It's like the kind of people that certain fighters are. And Errol Spence is a very gritty kid that fights really hard. And Ugas is the same exact way. Spence has been boxing more, since he's, reached the top stage. He doesn't go for the knockout as much as he used to when he was coming up. But he's a gritty guy. He's a high contact fighter. Ugas is also a gritty guy and a high contact fighter. And it's so much at stake. It's 3 belts at stake. It's huge money at stake. His legacy on the line. I feel like these guys are going to fight really, really hard. I don't know if it's going to be a knockout, but I expect another good fight, similar to what we saw with Fundora and Lubin last week.
Ooh, I like that. Spence obviously has been boxing more since he won a title. How do you think he looked against Danny Garcia in December 2020? Did he look like the Spence of old to you?
What's funny? Spence, he didn't look great in that fight, but I don't think he looked bad. I think he gets a little bit overblown. I think Danny Garcia can punch. I've been in the gyms around Danny for a long time, and he can punch. Yeah. And you don't want to get hit by him. He's a very, very heavy-handed fighter. And I think at the top level, what Spence has done, Spence, he's a guy that fought at 152 as an amateur. He has long arms. He has the frame of a junior middleweight. And he actually fought one of my guys, Julian Williams, in the amateurs in the 2009. I think it was the U.S. Championships. So he's bigger than a lot of these welterweights. And what he realizes is that he can't get past his jab and his reach because of his physicality and his long arms. So he just boxes. He's not the, exact destroyer that he was, when he was coming up. Like when he fought Chris Algieri, man, and Lamont Peterson, he was just like a wrecking ball. Right. But, the top level, one punch could change things. So he's chose to box a little more. I think he looked a little skinny that fight. He probably didn't rehydrate. the way he normally does. He probably trained a little bit too hard, actually, when you can't put the weight back on. I thought Danny filled out a little bit more than what he did, just from the naked eye. Danny looked a little bigger than him. That was his first fight back. I didn't think he looked bad. I think he got hurt that fight, and I think the announcers missed it. At the end of the 10th or 11th round, he got hit high on the head with a right hand, and he kind of like threw him off a little bit. Danny can punch. But he kept a good poker face, and he didn't, he didn't let people see it, but he kind of like flopped on his corner. He looked like he was like a little bit depleted. But here's the thing, it's boxing. It's not a video game. He is a human being. He can have a bad night. I don't think that means he slipped because he didn't have the best night in the world against a guy like Danny Garcia. I think that we judge things too much on a microcosm, when a fighter is, has an accident or he gets over 30 and he has a bad night. Everybody says, well, that guy slipped. He's literally had one fight after his accident. I think it's too small of a microcosm to judge him on because let's just be honest. He struggled with Sean Porter, and I thought he needed the knockdown to win that fight, and that was before the accident. That wasn't after the accident. Mm-hmm. So, I don't like to judge things like that. I need to see 3 or 4 fights. In this era, guys are not fighting 3 or 4 times in a year, so it takes a little bit longer to assess things. But I just think it was a tough fight. I thought he won the fight. I thought he at least 8-4, but I thought Danny's heavy-handed, and I thought Danny hurt him, but Danny didn't really go for it, and the announcers kind of missed it. But I thought he hit him with a right hand high on his head. But here's the thing that I like about Spence. Even when he's not having his best night, he finds a way to get it done. Because he had a tough fight with Sean Porter that people don't remember. It was before the accident, and he found a way to get it done. So, that's a tell of a real champion. That's a sign of a real champion when you can get it done and still win if you're not having your A+ best night. So I think, I think him slipping and stuff is being a little bit over-exaggerated. I think we need more evidence to that.
But you kind of led me to my next question. He's had only one fight in the past 2.5 years because of the accident and the eye injury. Do you expect that to be a factor in the fight?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what he's been doing. Ring rust shows up not just from inactivity, it's from not being in the gym. I don't know what he does in his free time. I don't know how high his weight gets. I don't know how often he spars. I don't know what he does in camp. Like we saw Keith Thurman a couple months ago. He didn't have an ounce of ring rust. He looked great. And then sometimes you see guys and they do have ring rust. It depends on what your lifestyle is and how disciplined you are and what kind of regiment you have, away from the cameras when you're not fighting. So I don't know. I honestly can't say. From his interviews and the way he looks really motivated. And I think he's tired of people saying he's scared of this fighter and scared of that fighter. And I think he really wants to put it on the show. And I expect a really determined Errol Spence that, it's going to fight a really good fight. I expect both of them to fight a good fight, and I think it's going to be a brutal war. I honestly do. I think it's going to be a hell of a fight on the same line as Ugas. As Fundora and Lubin. I think it's so much at stake, and I think Earl is tired. He gets a lot of criticism from the media about Terrence Crawford, about Jerron Ennis, about this guy, that guy. I think he's motivated to put on the show, and I think Ugas is one of the hottest fighters in boxing. He hasn't lost in maybe 4 or 5 years. He's been looking great. He beat Pacquiao. He fights really hard too. I think this is going to be a great fight. I honestly do. I think their styles and their temperaments are going to mesh, and we're going to see an explosive fight.
Switching to Ugas, everybody's, has talked, ad nauseum about the Manny Pacquiao fight. What about his fight against Sean Porter? What did you make of that?
Man, he fought great. I was surprised he didn't get the decision. I thought it was like I can't remember exactly, like a slip or a knockdown at the end of the fight that wasn't called. It was like, I thought he fought great that fight. He doesn't have a lot of knockouts, but he's physically strong. Like he was able to back Sean up, who's a strong guy. I thought he fought good. He doesn't even seem like he recognizes that fight as a loss. You know, that's the only fight he's lost since he's been over to PBC, and a lot of people think he won that fight. Right. It was a really good fight. When I was watching the fight, I thought he had a little bit of an edge, and then it was like a knockdown, or I think it was a slip at the end of the fight, but it looked like he hit Sean with a right hand that wasn't called, which I thought was going to give him the decision, but it wasn't called. It was like one of those drawish, close kind of fights, but I thought he looked excellent in that fight. Listen, you can't judge boxing like this, what I'm about to say, but he performed just as good versus Sean as Errol did.
Yes, he did.
To be honest. Mm-hmm. You know, there was no separation in their performances versus Sean. The difference is that Ugas was the B side of the fight, and he didn't get the knockdown call, and Errol was the A side, and he knocked Sean down. You know what I mean? Because I thought Errol needed the knockdown to win that fight. You know, and if Ugas would have got his knockdown, then it'd have been a different fight. So, you know, sometimes, you know, your standing in the odds of boxing, you know, determines whether you get that close call or not. But that's the only difference in their performance level versus Sean Porter, because they both performed about the same to me.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. So you made it clear that you think Ugas is a bigger threat to Spence than a lot of people think he is. But why do you think people are sleeping on Ugas?
Because Errol Spence is like a superstar. You know, he's one of the top 5 or 6 draws in boxing. You know, we have not seen him lose. Records do count. You know, he has that look. He has the pedigree. He deserves everything he gets, you know. So while Ugas is a good fighter, I think that it's hard for people to bet against or pick against Errol in this fight, because the eyeball test says that Errol probably is a little bit more than Ugas. You know, he's a little bit more blue chippy. He's a little bit stronger, a little bit better puncher, a little bit sharper, you know, just like he has slight advantages, you know, in the fight with the eyeball test that's going. And in the close fight, it's a game of inches. It comes down to that, you know. So I think that that's what people see, where they're both thoroughbred racehorses, but one is slightly above the other one.
So in your opinion, what does Ugas have to do to pull off the upset?
I think he has to use Errol's aggression against him. Excuse me?
That's what Ugas, Ismail Salas, that's what he said, Ugas' trainer.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, I didn't know that. But I think he has to use his aggression against them. Errol has a very, very underrated jab. I think that he has to find a way to neutralize Errol's hard southpaw jab. I think, and I think Ugas has to not let Errol bang on his body. Errol's a really, really strong body puncher. And last but not least, I think Ugas has to land his right hand. Ugas has a good variety to his right hand. He throws it straight, he throws it underneath, and he loops it. And I think he has to, the looping right hand is an Achilles heel to a southpaw, because they really don't duck it. They just kind of catch it. And when you catch it, Ugas can find a way to get it past his gloves. So I think that he has to land his right hand. And in the Cuban boxing system, there's a lot of amateur Cuban southpaws, and Ugas seems to do really well with southpaw fighters because of his the variety of his right hand. He doesn't throw it the same way every time. And he actually beat a southpaw from Philadelphia by the name of Ray Robinson that I know from the gyms, and he was hitting him with different varieties of the right hand. So I think those are the 4 things that he needs to do.
And I'm getting pumped thinking about this. What's your prediction?
Man,
we got to wait for the bread bag, the daily bread bill bag, or you gonna drop it over here?
You know, I just want to enjoy the fight. You know, I don't really like making predictions of fights that I'm attending and I'm here and I'm around both guys. I think Errol Spence deserves to be the favorite, but I just want to kind of enjoy the fight, you know. And my eyeball test tells me that I'm leaning towards Errol a little bit, but I think it's a close fight. you know, and he deserves to be the favorite, you know. I expect Earl to come out with a lot of determination. I think we're going to see a more aggressive Earl than what we've seen over the past few fights where he kind of boxed more.
Like it.
Yeah, great stuff as usual. So we wanted to get your take on a couple more of 147-pound fights. First, Bouhairie and Stanionis. How do you see that fight playing out?
Oh, my goodness. I think that's going to be a freaking war. You know, I don't even know who's going to win that fight. Flip a coin. Maybe Boots. I can't pronounce his name. That's the one that beat Jamal James, right?
Right, yeah, Bouhairie, yeah.
Bouhairie. Mm-hmm.
Maybe him. I don't really know, but I think that's going to be a war. I think that's going to be a train wreck. Two guys that go right at it. You know,
Good.
That's how I see the fight going. I think it's going to be a train wreck, and I think it's going to create another player and a contender in the division, you know, full of players. You know, so he seems to be getting some fresh meat in the division. And I think that's going to be a war.
Good stuff. How about Cody Crowley and Josecito Lopez? Any thoughts on that?
You know what, man? I haven't seen much of the guy Cody Crowley, but everybody I talked to are really high on him. I've only seen highlights of him, you know, and Josecito Lopez seems to have 9 lives. So I think that whoever did the matchmaking on this card, they made some good fights because everybody's an action fighter that's high contact and that's violent. So I expect that to be another war from what I've seen of, well, I know what Josecito Lopez is. He's a warrior. And from what I've seen of Cody Crowley, you know, he is too. I think he's a little younger and fresher. So, you know, most times the younger, fresher guy has the advantage. But I think that's going to be a war. It's good matchmaking on this card because the leading bouts are all like violent affairs.
I agree. Now, switching gears for a second, we saw a great fight last weekend between Sebastian Fundora and Erickson Lubin. What was your take on that fight?
Man, you know, everybody asked me about that fight. I would say, man, this fight is either going to be Margarito versus Cotto or Mosley versus Margarito. And unfortunately for Lubin, it was Margarito versus Cotto. I think it just came down to Fundora pushing Lubin at an uncomfortable pace and Fundora being able to take Lubin's punches better than Lubin can take his punches. You know, sometimes boxing is like that. Sometimes we judge the skill and who's more aesthetically pleasing, which is Lubin. But it's not, boxing doesn't always come down to that. It's not who looks the best. It's who can beat who when they're in the ring. You know, fighters like Fundora who he looks like a choir boy. He's a little bit uncoordinated. He's taller. He doesn't look strong. He doesn't look like he's punching hard. They have like a willpower. They have intangibles that, you know, that don't always show up when you check in boxes, but in the ring against them, it shows up. I think that Lubin is an excellent fighter. He's extremely talented. I think he did the best he could. He knew he needed that fight for his current standing, his legacy. He didn't want to, you know, lose twice before he won the title, which is hard to do in this era and be able to come back. I think he gave it all he had. I knew it was going to be, you got two young guys like that have those type of temperaments. You know, I knew it was going from the very first bell. I could see what was going on. I just think it comes down to a durability thing where, you know, Fundora, you know, there's the myth about tall, skinny guys can't take punches because that guy has a rock for a head. Even when Lubin knocked him down, he jumped right up and won the next round. He's an extremely tough out. You know, it's going to take somebody who's very physically strong, who has really, really good endurance, and who is very durable because he's going to hit you. You know, people say, well, he should fight on the outside. That's baloney. He fights where it's more comfortable for him to fight. He has thick glasses. He probably can't see that good from the outside. He probably doesn't.
That's so funny.
You watch them in his interviews, his glasses are extremely thick fighter. You know what I mean? They can't see that good. He probably can't, pick up on things from the outside. So he adapts to his physical strength. And let me tell you something, that uppercut that he lands is perfect from the inside because your face is at his chest level. So that uppercut doesn't have to travel far to hit you. So you were right. If you notice, Lubin was able to hit him with right hook and overhand lefts from the outside. It's on the inside that Lubin couldn't handle him, even though he was a better man. So, your gifts dictate where you fight, not so much your physical attributes, because guys like Fundora and Diego Corrales and Riddick Bowe, they like it up close. It's better for them to fight up close. They see better there. So he can fight. He reminds me, he got a little Jared Hurd in this game. He reminds me a little bit of Paul Williams, but most of all Margarito, where it's like he's downhill. And he has those really good endurance muscles where it doesn't take him a long time to recover. I know I'm kind of getting scientific with you guys, but if you see fighters, some fighters are built in a way where after they explode, they need a long time to recover because they have like big, quick twitch muscles, and they don't, and all of the oxygen, it takes a while to get them back. I'll give you an example, a guy like Andre Berto. You ever see him fighting fights in spurts? It's a big burst of explosion, and then he needs some time to recover. Where a guy like Fundora, he has those endurance muscles like a swimmer or a long distance guy, where looks like he's not punching hard, but he doesn't need a rest. Everything he's doing is just boom, 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 boom. Eventually he's touching you and he's breaking your face up because it's so constant. It's like dropping water on the concrete over and over again. He's a tough fighter, man. You know what I mean? I got a lot of respect for him. And I got a lot of respect for Lubin because Lubin was not quitting, man. He dug down, and his heart and his tenacity made it into a great fight because he kept answering the call over and over again until he couldn't answer it no more. I thought it was an excellent fight. And, unfortunately for Lubin, he just the puncher in every fight. Like, people thought Lubin hit harder than him, and I always say, when you judge a fight, it's not who hits the hardest; it's who can take the other guy's punches the best. That's the puncher of the fight. It's not it's not like you're hooked up to a thing where somebody is telling you how much pressure you can put as far as pounds per square inch. If that's the case, Lubin probably does hit harder than him. But when two human beings are fighting, if I can take your punch better than you can take mine, then I hit harder than you. Do you understand what I'm saying? So Lubin probably does punch harder than him, but if them two are fighting, Fundora is the puncher because he can take Lubin's punches better. So, great fight, man. And I thought Kevin Cunningham did a great job. He gave great corner instructions. I thought he stopped the fight just in time. He gave Lubin, the chances that he needed, and I think he did a good job with stopping the fight.
So you agreed with the stoppage?
Yeah, I didn't like them throwing ice at him. Everybody wants to be the de facto trainer. Everybody wants to be the person that, sometimes people hang around fighters just so they can criticize the trainer. They really don't serve a purpose. They're not managers. They're not the promoters. They're not the strength and conditioning coach. They're not the assistants. They're like the built-in critic. They're like the de facto trainer. Everything that the trainer or somebody from the team tells you to do, they suggest you do the opposite. And that's what happens in boxing. You always have somebody with an opinion on what the fighter should be doing or what the trainer should have did. But I thought that Lubin, in the 8th and 9th round, Lubin was sort of like wanting those rounds to be over. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, towards the end of the round, he was like glad those rounds was over. His body language was that of a person that was capitulating. He wasn't quitting. He was giving it all he had, but his body was giving. Towards the end of the 9th round, he could barely stand up. I didn't like the way his body looked. And I think Kevin Cunningham being around him, up close and personal with him in the corner after every round, seeing his face deteriorate, it's not a right or wrong. It's a subjective judgment call, and it was his call, and that's what he felt. Some guys would have let it go a little bit further, and that's when they get their fighter in that situation, they can let him go a little bit further. But I think Kevin Cunningham did the right thing in his eyes, and you got to respect it, man. He has that kid's blood on his hands.
Yeah.
And I think he did the right thing, man. You know, it's a shame that everybody judges things in that capacity. It's a split-second decision that you're making, and you have a person's life in your hands. And I respect this call. And I've personally seen fights where I thought they were stopped too early. I thought the guy just wanted to get a payday, and as soon as the kitchen got a little bit hot, they just threw the towel in, and they didn't even give the fight a chance to play out. But I think rounds 10, 11, and 12 would have been very, very tough on Lubin. And I think, you know, I think he did what he felt was best, and I respect him for that, because that's not an easy call. You know, he's had some good fighters in the past, and Lubin is the best kid he's had over the last few years, and I know he was very high on him. Lubin had just scored a knockdown. They wanted to win a title together, and that's not an easy call. In over 60 professional fights as a trainer, as 12 years doing this, I've only had to stop one fight, and that was Karan Davis versus David Benavidez. It's a very, very tough call. You want to give your guy every chance that he can get. And, you know, I respect anybody that's in that position, and they do it, because it takes a lot to stop that fight.
Yeah.
Breadman, last question. Getting back to Saturday night, what would you like to see from your fighter, Ochoa?
You know, execute the game plan, go out there, have fun, and, you know, let the chips fall where they are. You know, don't overthink it. Don't let the moment be too big for him. You know, don't get too high, don't get too low, and pull it off. I think he can, guys. I'm telling you, I do. We got a game plan, man. We gonna fight this kid. You know, Zach's not scared of him at all. You know, we're gonna find out what he got. You know, if he's the real deal, we're gonna find out on Saturday night, because we had a camp. We really did, man. Zach came down to Philly. He got an Airbnb. We put the work in. He got great sparring. You know, we did everything we were supposed to do. And, you know, we're ready. That's all I can say. You know, I'm not trash talking. I'm not making any predictions. You know, I just want him to go out there and execute everything we did in camp. I want him to have fun, think with a clear mind, and, you know, and go out there and do his thing. And I think that he will. He got to fight a really smart fight, because this kid's a big puncher. But, you know, like I said, the puncher and the fighters who could take the other guy's punches the best. Let's see what he could take.
Man, I think I could speak for Ken when I say that we learned so much from talking to you, which means we need to talk to you more often. So we really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. That was great.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, guys. Thank you.
April 16th. One of the top pound-for-pound fighters on the planet, undefeated world champion Errol Spence Jr., takes on title holder Yordenis Ugas, hot off a career-defining win. One epic stage, two dominant champions, 3 world titles on the line. Time to put up or shut up. Spence versus Ugas for the unified welterweight world championship. Saturday, April 16th, live on pay-per-view.
It's time for the week in review. Last Saturday, we saw an absolutely brilliant battle on PBC on Showtime. Erickson Lubin and Sebastian Fundora fighting for the WBC interim 154-pound title, and they definitely fought for it. Both guys showed unbelievable heart. Lubin dropped in the second, comes back to drop Fundora in the 7th, but ultimately the towering inferno was just too much, battering a brave Lubin in the 8th and 9th rounds, which convinced Lubin's trainer Kevin Cunningham to stop the fight following the 9th round. Mike, I think we can all agree that this was an instant fight of the year candidate.
Oh, absolutely. It had, you just sort of laid it out. It had everything. It had ebbs and flows, knockdowns. It had, you know, dramatic surprises, so much grit from both guys. Just absolutely loved that fight. I think it really created a buzz, you know, on the internet, you know, that kind of thing, social media, because it was just crazy.
Yeah, it definitely was. And of course, a lot of that buzz has been centered around Cunningham's decision to stop the fight. What was your thoughts on that?
I thought he made the right decision at the time, and I still do. Lubin had taken hundreds of hard shots. Let's look at his face. You can tell. And I didn't think he was, and at the end, I didn't think he was firing back at Fundora in the final moments, at least not like he had been. He kind of was in the process of becoming a real punching bag. I just thought it was going to only get uglier for Lubin if it continued. So, yeah, I like the stoppage. I think he saved him from himself.
Yeah, and you didn't even see that much complaining from Lubin. I think he, understood that his trainer did that in love and concern. But was it a tactical error by Lubin to stand and trade, or did Fundora just basically give him no option?
I know Kevin Cunningham was yelling at Lubin between rounds to move out of harm's way, and he should have spun away probably more than he did. But I believe Fundora's pressure made that very difficult. I mean, you could only imagine what it's like to have a giant like him just rain punches down on you from beginning to end. He was on pace to throw 1,000 punches had it gone the distance, and he just punches really hard, really punishing blow. He's not a one-punch knockout guy, but he's got punishing heavy hands. That's just a really hard storm to weather. So I get why Lubin really couldn't do much.
Yeah, I think that Lubin would have had to have stood and traded regardless, at least at certain points of the fight. So I'm not sure there was much he could do. Perhaps he could have boxed more, but the brawl was inevitable. Do you think that, going back to the 7th round, it looked like Lubin was on the verge of getting stopped, and then he comes back to drop Fundora late in the frame. What were your thoughts when all of that was happening?
It was just an incredible round, and also a microcosm of Lubin's courage. He was taking like heavy leather that round. I remember thinking at some point during that round, oh man, he's really putting a beating on him now. I just don't know how much longer he could last. And then out of nowhere, he hurts Fundora. I think it was a right hand. I'm not sure what it was, but he hurt Fundora with one punch, and then he just sort of unleashed his own storm on Fundora. And Fundora took a knee, which I thought was a pretty smart thing to do.
Yeah. Do you think, or did you think when Fundora took that knee, do you think Lubin had turned it around at that point, despite what we saw earlier in the round? Or
I think he made it clear that he was still in the fight based on what he did. That's for sure. But I didn't think Fundora was hurt that badly. And he came out in round 8 as if nothing had happened. That was a competitive round. Then things really went south for Lubin. The 9th round was just brutal.
Yeah, it sure was. What's next for Lubin?
Well, I guess I'm stating the obvious when I say that's a tough loss for him, especially the way it came down. He'll have to go back to the drawing board once again, as he did after he was stopped by Jermell Charlo in the 1st round. I think he needs to give himself time to heal physically and probably mentally too, get back to work. And then, I think he'd have to take a transition fight or two to rebuild it, his reputation and his place, as a contender. I want to be clear. He did well, and he showed just tremendous courage, but it was a bad loss in the end. It might not be easy to bounce back from that.
Yeah, I definitely think he should take some time off, assess, and I think if he fought a great fight. Maybe if he tried to box, things would have been a little different. So I'm looking forward to him getting back in a ring whenever he's ready. How good is Sebastian Fundora, though?
Really good. As I wrote for Boxing a Junkie, if you doubted him before that fight, you just can't doubt him now. I find it fascinating. I still find it fascinating that he doesn't use his height and reach at all, but still overwhelms his opponents, including good ones. You have to remember that Lubin is a talented, experienced guy who was on a hot streak. He was one of the hottest fighters in the business, and Fundora just beat the you-know-what out of him. It's that relentless pressure, his ability to break down his opponents, his ability to take punches, which was so clear in this fight. The dude's just a monster. I wouldn't pick him to beat Jermell Charlo, who I think is still the best in the division, but I will never, ever put anything past Fundora again.
So who would you like to see him face next?
Well, I think he has a shot at fighting the winner of Charlo Castaño, the Charlo Castaño rematch, right? Him or Tim Tszyu, I guess. And who knows? Maybe the Charlo Castaño winner vacates for whatever reason. We don't know. We never know how these things are going to play out. The point is that Fundora is now in a position to fight for a world title or undisputed championship. I would add that I love the idea of a Fundora Tszyu fight, but I think both of them want to jump into a title fight right now.
Yeah, it's maybe too risky for both of them, although I don't think both those guys turning down the challenge. I'll tell you what I'd like to see Fundora fight. The guy we're going to talk about, former unified 154-pound champion Tony Harrison. He looked rejuvenated against Sergio Garcia in the co-feature, comfortably won 10-round unanimous decision. What was your take on Harrison's performance?
Excellent performance. He looked like Harrison at his best to me, much better than he looked in his draw with Brian Perella last year. Remember, he had fought, in that fight not long after his father and trainer had passed away, so his mind just wasn't in a good place. I think it was for this fight. He let Garcia be aggressive and just countered beautifully and consistently. He beat Garcia to the punch just over and over and over again. I think you rarely see a guy that aggressive accomplish so little, which I think is a testament to Harrison's ability and his performance in this fight. I just thought he looked terrific.
Yeah, so did I. Who would you like to see him face next? I've already pointed out I'd like a Fundora match if, let's say Tim Tszyu gets his shot next against the winner. I'd like to see Fundora face Harrison.
I thought of that, but man, oh man, is that a big risk for Fundora because of Harrison's boxing ability. But yeah, no, that's a great matchup. I thought maybe he fights the guy who doesn't get the title shot, which is kind of what you're saying in a way. Fundora or Tszyu. Otherwise, honestly, I'm not really sure who you have him fight. The 154-pound division is really, really good at the top. Charlo, Castaño, Fundora, Tszyu, Harrison, but it's not too deep after that. I think his handlers might have to be creative for his next fight if he doesn't get one of the guys that we were talking about.
Yeah, should be interesting, but can't wait to see him back in the ring. Now, the TV opener featured another 154-pound bout. Kevin Salgado and Brian Perella fighting to a 10-round draw. Mike, first, did you agree with the verdict?
No, I thought the draw was a bad decision. I had it 97-93 for Perella, 7 rounds to 3. Neither guy did much of anything in that fight. I think you can count the number of eye-catching power shots on 2 hands, from both guys. The one weapon, though, that was effective was Perella's jab, which I thought he landed consistently. There were a couple of rounds where he didn't throw it as much, but overall, I thought he landed a lot of jabs. I think he won the fight with that punch, and I didn't even think it was that close. So I was kind of surprised when they made the announcement.
Yeah, I didn't score the fight. I typically don't do when watching that first go around, but based on what I saw, I would lean toward Perella as well. I thought he controlled distance, landed significantly more cleaner shots with the jab. There weren't that many big power punches that landed for either fighter. So, to your point, the jab was the key weapon in the fight. What's next for these two guys?
Well, I don't know. I think Salgado's got a ways to go. I just don't think he did much of anything in that fight. So I think that he's going to have to take 1, 2, 3 fights, to transition to the top level, because I just didn't see anything to think that he's ready for a big fight right now. Perella, the guy's had some bad luck, hasn't he? How long has it been since he's actually won a fight? Yeah. But I see the ability. I think part of the problem for him in that fight was sort of what I was alluding to, is that he didn't throw many power shots, didn't throw many combinations. I think he needs to work that out with Roy Jones Jr., who was his trainer. Yeah. But having said that, I think he could fight a top 10 guy and be competitive. I didn't really look through the list to see who that might be, but I think he's a really good boxer who could be competitive with anyone if he throws more power shots.
Maybe he gets a rematch with Tony Harrison. Who knows?
But you know what? I like that fight now, actually.
Yeah. I mean, that fight was pretty hard to call the first time. And given their performances now, Harrison definitely looked better this time that he did against Perella. I wouldn't mind seeing those two fight again if Harrison doesn't fight a Fundora or Tim Tszyu. Let's take a quick break and then come back with toe to toe.
April 16th. One of the top pound-for-pound fighters on the planet, undefeated world champion Errol Spence Jr. takes on title holder Yordenis Ugas, hot off a career-defining win. One epic stage, 2 dominant champions, 3 world titles on the line. Time to put up or shut up. Spence versus Ugas for the unified welterweight world championship. Saturday, April 16th, live on pay-per-view.
It's that part of the show where Mike and I go toe to toe. Now, Saturday's pay-per-view headliner features 2 fighters who competed in the Olympics. So this week, we're going to list our top 5 most successful pro boxers to have competed in the last 3 Olympics. We're limiting this to former U.S. Olympians. And because the 2 fighters were in the men's category, we're going to stay in that grouping. However, it should be noted that if we added the women's category to this, Clarissa Shields is likely comfortably number 1. We're going to go in ascending order, Mike. So let's start with number 5.
Real quick, I just wanted to add to what you say. Technically there have been 4 Olympics that could be considered, but the last one just happened. So obviously the guys in that Olympics haven't accomplished much.
Sure.
Okay, so number 5, Shakur Stevenson. I feel like I might be jumping the gun a bit because he's just getting started, but he's accomplished a lot already in his career, including victory over Joet Gonzalez to win his first title, 126 pounds, and then a victory over Jamal Herring to win his second title already. And if we wait a few more weeks, I believe there'd be no question whatsoever, because I think he's going to beat Oscar Valdez to unify 2 of the 130-pound titles. I guess you get from what I'm saying that I think Stevenson is a special young fighter. He'll be a lot higher on this list, I think, in a couple years.
Yeah, I'll get to Stevenson in a second. My number 5 is Jose Ramirez, former unified champ at 140. It's a ticket seller in California, and he's but he's had some real nice wins over Victor Postol, Jose Pedraza, Maurice Hooker, Jose Zepeda. He suffered that loss to Josh Taylor in May last year and probably needs to move up, but certainly he's had a good pro career this far.
Which is why he's on my list a little higher up, so I'll hold off on him.
Okay, well, who you got at number 4?
Number 4 for me is Demetrius Andrade. Andrade probably has the ability to be higher on this list, but whether it's his fault or not, we could talk about that for a long time. He doesn't have the resume to be higher than number 4. He's held titles, but what's his greatest victory? Vanes Martirosyan, Liam Williams. I hope he gets a chance to face a legitimate test sooner rather than later. It would be a shame if he didn't, because he's obviously a talented guy.
Yeah, I agree with you, and he's on my list as well. My number 4, Shakur Stevenson. I think you kind of outlined everything already. Former 2016 Olympic silver medalist. He's won world titles at 126 and 130. Just a very talented fighter, and with his skill set, the sky is the limit.
Yep, I agree with you 100% on Mr. Stevenson.
Let's go to number 3.
Number 3 for me is a guy that you mentioned, Jose Ramirez. You mentioned his resume. He's got a pretty strong resume with victories over Zepeda, Hooker, Postol, Jose Pedraza. And the loss to Taylor, even though he lost the title unification bout, was super, super close. He could have won that fight. So he's a really good fighter with a solid list of accomplishments. And he also is just getting started.
Yeah. And my number 3, someone you mentioned, Demetrius Andrade, I think one of the more underrated fighters in the sport. He's won world titles at 154 and 160. He's now up to 168, trying to win an interim title there. Still undefeated since turning pro following the 2008 Olympics. Well respected by his peers is something that I've noticed. A lot of fighters we talk about Demetrius Andrade and how good he is. And like you, I hope he gets a big fight soon.
Yep.
Let's go to number 2.
Okay, my number 2 is Deontay Wilder. I don't think that Wilder has a super deep resume, which is mostly a product of a division that isn't super deep. It's just the way it is. But few fighters have had the impact on the sport that Wilder has. He was a heavyweight title holder for how long? 5 years. That's a really long time to hold any title. He took part in a classic 3-fight series with Tyson Fury, including a fight of the year in the last one. And he's recognized as one of the hardest punchers who ever laced him up. The Ring magazine just released a new list of the 100 hardest punchers pound for pound over the last century, over the last 100 years. Wilder was number 16. Think about that. Number 16 among tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of fighters over the past century. I thought that was a big compliment to him, and he deserved it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, my number 2 is Errol Spence Jr. You talk about successful, you're talking about one of the biggest draws in the sport right here, 4 straight pay-per-views, huge turnouts when he fights. I expect more of the same on Saturday night, and he has the credentials to back it up. He's been champ for nearly 5 years now. He's unified world titles against tough opposition at 147 and will be fighting for a 3rd title in just a few days.
So I'll just give you my number 1, which is Errol Spence Jr. Yeah, so this is actually pretty easy for me. It was obvious to me, but obviously I respect your opinion. I think he has a higher number of important victories than anybody else here, with wins over Kell Brook, Lamont Peterson, Mikey Garcia, Sean Porter, and Danny Garcia, and another big one coming up. None of these other guys has quite that resume, I don't think. And this is important to me. I know that pound for pound is just sort of this mythical thing that gives you an idea who the best guys are regardless of weight. But Spence has climbed higher on that list than anybody else that we're talking about here, much higher, which I think is an indication of his accomplishments and how much he's respected. So for me, he was kind of an obvious number one, but I get that you have Wilder number one.
Who said I had Wilder number one?
I don't know. It's just I'm giving it a shot.
Yeah, you make a great case for Errol Spence Jr. I have no qualms with that. My number one is Deontay Wilder. What can you say about this guy? He's unquestionably the biggest American star in the sport today. The man has dropped and or stopped everyone he's faced, held the world title for years, 5 years, as you mentioned, made 10 title defenses of that title, the WBC belt, highlight reel after highlight reel knockout, revived the heavyweight division, was a joy in and out of the ring, the tremendous trilogy with Tyson Fury. I do hope he comes back, but if he decides not to, I support him either way. He's given so much to us, and he deserves his flowers now.
Ditto. I think maybe it'll take him leaving for people to realize how exciting this guy was to watch fight. Just waiting for that bomb to land is one of the most exciting things. I've been doing this for longer than I want to say right now. and there aren't many things that I saw that were more exciting than just waiting for that bomb to land. And he almost always landed.
Yeah. Incredible fighter. Hopefully we see him again soon. That's going to do it for this week's show. We want to thank Stephen Breadman Edwards for his incredible insight. Saturday night, the year's best card takes place at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. We've got Showtime Championship Boxing at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Then, of course, the big pay-per-view begins at 9 p.m. Eastern Time as Errol Spence and Yordenis Ugas throw down with 3 world titles on the line. You don't want to miss it. And we'll be back next week to break it all down right here on the PBC Podcast.